Welcome everybody to the Silq webinar series. I'm here with Barrie Bruce, who's a co-founder and chief creative officer and the chief product officer from Mitely. Mitely is a phenomenal brand that we've been very honored to be associated with from essentially their founding days. We're going to be covering very key topics for brands out there who are trying to essentially manage the chaos that tends to be global supply chains, are trying to figure out how you're going to be launching a brand and growing a brand in today's marketplace. At a high level, we're going to be covering three major topics. One, very relevant in today's day and age, covering managing overseas production. What does it mean? Not everything is made in America, despite us, despite the current effort by the administration to bring back jobs and manufacturing to America. As it stands today, it's going to be a long journey until we get there. So this is still a very relevant topic in today's day and age on making products overseas. So we're going to be covering that. We're going to be going into topics around how do you manage real-time insights on what's happening a million miles away from where you are sitting as an importer, as a brand owner, as a retailer in the United States. You are expected to know what's happening in order to be able to make real-time decisions. And largely, brands today tend to rely on spreadsheets. So how do you kind of balance between the two? You don't want to take a gun to a knife fight. You want to make sure that you're appropriately equipped to handle the complexity, while at the same time also try to leverage all the tools that are available at your disposal. So we'll be going into it. And lastly, with all that's changing and changing customer demands and higher expectations, how do you integrate quality control as a means to not only deliver a phenomenal product to your customers, but also use that as a guardrail to manage your operations overseas, making sure that timelines are aligning with their expectations, amongst other things. So those are the three broad topics we'll be covering today. This is going to be a conversation, a very conversational style webinar. This isn't so much us providing instructions or instructional approach to this. So we look forward to it. For those of you who are listening to this for the first time or are listening to me talk for the first time, at a very high level, what does Silq do? Silq is a digital freight forwarder and a QC service provider. So the core of our business tends to be working with brands who make products overseas. We arrange the shipping of that particular product from factory floor all the way to their warehouse store in the United States. There are different modes of shipping, as outlined as you see on the screen over here. Full container loads, shared container loads, which is a very Silq exclusive offering, which we'll dig into later. Less than container loads, this is for people who are not filling up an entire container. You're only paying for a portion of the container. And lastly, air freight. So these are our core freight offerings. But the unique differentiator that binds us as essentially a very valuable service provider for companies like Mitely and a whole bunch of other brands is a QC service offering, which involves us essentially deploying over 300 inspectors on the field across Asia Pacific who go to the factories to inspect merchandise as it's getting ready and give clients like Barrie the visibility into how the product gets made, essentially how the sausage gets made, so to speak. So yes, now without further ado, I'd love to introduce Barrie from Mitely. As I've said before, we've been incredibly proud to have been part of the journey with Barrie from day one of their existence. We've been early partners. We've gone through the thick and thin of launching a brand, and I'm very excited to hear directly from Barrie on what it takes to build an incredible brand today, socially responsible, environmentally responsible brand. So I'm going to let Barrie introduce herself really quickly, and then we'll dive into the topics we spoke about. So Barrie, the stage is yours.
Great. Thanks, Ram. So I started in manufacturing about 25 years ago. I worked with a merchandiser and who taught me how to tell the story of product in general. And from there, I was really interested in purchasing and sourcing, and I did that for a long time. This was a time when most products were already overseas, but they were still, the US still had a significant amount of product that was being made within the US. And so over the years I worked, and which was great, in both sides, so imports as well as domestic production. And so from there, I mean, for me, honestly, the next step was always, you can have a great design, but if you can't actually get it made, then you're just talking about it. So supply chain management just became what I do, and design is there. And I still do that, and I still love it. And the creative process is the creative process. And I'm lucky to have that. But for me, supply chain management has taken over everything. And you need that. And so part of that is myself, and then also working with partners like Silq, which, there's definitely help, and having those partnerships and bridges of communication is great. And then I'll say the last part that in the last 10 years or so, I realized I probably should figure out the logistics part of it, right? While I'm not an expert in logistics, I'm comfortable with shipping, whether it's air and sea. So I have my approach for product and manufacturing it's pretty full circle. There definitely are times when I'm surprised by things and bumps in the road, but I've been around the block. I've seen a lot of it, and I'm here for it. In terms of Mitely, I started Mitely with two other women. We started talking about Mitely in 2018, and we became a company in 2019. The three of us came together. We all knew each other, but we knew each other from different aspects of life. We all have varying experience in manufacturing, but not the same. So it wasn't like three of us wanted to be designers, and that it was really helpful. We all came together to support each other. And we created this brand. I think within 6 months, we had product on the shelf. And that just speaks to, because we have lots of resources, like I said, experience, we were focused, we knew what we wanted to do. And so we launched a pretty small assortment, very focused assortment of kidswear, a couple dresses, leggings, core items, t-shirts. And from there, we set out to test the market. And then we eventually got into more of a full assortment of sleepwear, kind of head to toe. So everything from playwear, socks, underwear and bras for girls. And then about a year ago or so, we acquired another brand called Of an Origin. It was a brand that a woman named Candace Carlson founded, and we loved her approach. And it's a women's brand that's maternity friendly. It's very modular in design. So a woman can wear it while pregnant, she can wear it postpartum, and then kind of changes with lifestyle and needs of a woman's body, and just needs to getting back to life. So that's under our Mitely Inc. umbrella. And then we've recently launched Of an Origin Home, which is kind of a part of the Of an Origin story. That is bedding and loungewear. And we have all sorts of things planned that I won't go into today, but we see a ton of opportunity, and we're here to keep on going with all sorts of our ideas and products.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, first off, thank you for joining us first, and thank you for this very, very in-depth explanation of your background over here. When we're doing a research for this particular webinar, one thing we found out was obviously your interest in designing and sewing vintage material goes back to when you were 8 years old. And it's always incredible to see people who've been in this business, or in frankly any business, for a long period of time, trying to take a new approach to it and continue to push the boundaries. It's just the opportunities are limitless. The outcomes are limitless. It's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when, in terms of when they achieve breakthrough success. It's always incredible working with folks like you. So thank you. Thank you for being a customer. Thank you for being willing to share your story. So really appreciate it. As we transition into the main presentation, a few quick housekeeping items. Since this is a pre-recorded webinar, for any questions about the content, we encourage people listening to comment below, and possible, please tag Silq, and we'll be in touch with answers. We'll also make sure that we surface them to Barrie, and Barrie is also able to contribute to specific questions that you might have. And lastly, please stick around towards the end. We have a special promotion from Barrie specifically for our viewers about Mitely products that are coming out and some of the new launches that are coming up as well. Please make sure you take advantage of being able to access some of these incredible products that they're building. So without further ado, I want to break into the first part of what we wanted to talk about today. First things first, launching a brand is very hard. Like you said, the years of experience you've had have led to you being able to bring a product to life in 6 months. So tell us a little bit about what kind of skill sets across the three of you, Tiara and Anya, the three founders of the Mitely brand, what brought you guys together? What are the complementary skill sets that you guys have in your particular case and you think are necessary to be able to launch a brand like this?
One thing that we've always, I think, been good at is asking questions to anyone who we've ever met. So if I may have been at a party 3 years ago and met someone, a friend of a friend or something, and I've logged that in my head of that's someone I may need to talk to, and not to be scared to ask those questions. I think also Anya always had, I'm probably not going to quote her exactly right, but something about you keep on asking until you hear the no. There's definitely times when we've knocked on doors, left messages, and no one's calling back. That's not a no. That's just a, we didn't get to you yet. And even when you get a no, you can still, there's a few left that you can, a few more no's you can get. Yeah, that's something that I learned really quickly on. I think being flexible. There's this like old adage about when you want something done, you ask the busiest person in the room. And from our perspective, we're three moms who, our kids were younger at the time. I have the youngest of the two of us, but we're busy. And it wasn't like we started this not like for fun, but it's what we do and it's what we know. And so we're driven, and that's a natural for us. So I feel like, especially in manufacturing, especially in apparel, if you aren't really inspired, if you don't believe in the product, it will you'll probably fizzle out. And maybe it's not, there's great parts to it and there's fun, but it's also, there's a lot.
Yeah, it's grueling. Starting a company is grueling. It's incredible what you said about that thing, the particular piece from Anya. I can go back to my time working with one of the best salespeople I've ever seen live and breathe, this former Flexport CRO. His name is Ben Braverman. He used to always tell us that even when they say no, let's say you knock on the door, and even if they do say no, you keep pushing until do, because there's always a but. No, I will not buy this, but I might buy this if you are willing to do that. And you gotta keep pushing the boundary until you get to the but. And it's so true. Regardless of selling a product or a service, when it comes to sales, it's that persistence is what counts. And that kind of carries through of, hey, it's not about just launching a product out there and hoping to the love of God it sells. It's also about staying persistent, keeping your ears to the ground, getting feedback, and continuing to iterate. So absolutely, cannot agree more with you. When you guys picked this, obviously I am aware of Tiara's background, having worked in sustainable apparel prior to this, but what was the emphasis as to what led you guys to build a fair trade and organic cotton product? It's not easy because now you're dealing with a limited subset of suppliers and people with capability. So curious on why that, and what were the compromises you guys had to make along the way to be able to sustain in that area?
In terms of the why, I would be foolish to say that the world needs another baby and kids apparel brand, right?
Absolutely.
We don't. Like, we have too many options. I'm the first one to say that. However, are there enough options for families with that for affordable and high quality? Maybe not. And then with the organic piece, now it gets a little tricky, and this may be a topic for another webinar, but there's a difference between companies who say we're organic, or we're eco-friendly, or we're earth-friendly, or we're sustainable, versus companies that have certification behind it. So it's a little bit tricky, and I won't call out any specific brands, but there are a lot that, so there's like a couple buckets. There are definitely some organic companies that have certification. They also sell $50 kids t-shirts. And that's that's a luxury item, essentially. I can say I don't buy $50 t-shirts for my kids for so many reasons.
But if Americans don't, but yes.
Yes. So we definitely didn't want to do that. And if that was where we had to start, I don't think we would be sitting here today, or I know that's not something we weren't interested in that. The why is we don't feel that there are enough brands or maybe there really isn't a brand that's high quality, that is truly certified organic and affordable. And I'll add in that fair trade piece. We are, I think, like the only brand in that category. Few that have like items available that have that, but like in our price point, we're on our own. We are still really affordable. We try our best with all the roadblocks that we have, really stay within that. We're not like in mass market prices, but we're affordable. And that's really important to us. So that's really the kind of the why for organic and that story. As far as the fair trade part, I mean, that one, so as you said, Tiara, she was really responsible for starting the fair trade home goods piece to fair trade certified USA. And that was many years ago. Like I said, I've been doing this for over 25 years. I've been to factories locally in the Bay Area, in California, or around the country. I've also seen factories all over the world. Some, they vary. I'll just say that. Some are great.
Yeah.
Some aren't. And if we were making a product that we didn't feel good about, it's not a good feeling. If my name is on, if our name is on it. And we've done amazing things. Our partner factories, when you hear stories and whether it's that you visit the factories or you hear the reports or you read them, and the workers come together and they decide that for the premiums they've earned for the year, they'll build health clinics on site or daycare programs. The list goes on, and it's fantastic. And so if we can do that and also hit those benchmarks of being affordable and high quality and organic, then why not be fair trade?
Absolutely. It's actually, I've been to some of your particular suppliers already in different parts of the world, and I've also seen suppliers that are not fair trade organic. I would definitely agree that the difference is night and day. And to the point that you made about making products that you're proud of, I think taking pride in your work is probably very important. That's what gives you the conviction to be able to take this tomorrow and stand with a straight face and be like, hey, I made this. It has my name on it. And when you tie it in with being committed to building a sustainable future, whether it's not just your customers who buy the product, but also the people who make the product, I think the story is much more stronger. I think you're delivering a purpose, and that's incredibly powerful. And it takes a lot to drive that story down to your customers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, I would say with the fair trade part, I think most people are familiar with it. Coffee, chocolate, those two are pretty big ones. I think there aren't as many resources for apparel. And I think it's a little bit uncomfortable. I think people don't love talking about that aspect of it. But I think as more companies or as customers are familiar with it and they see the action and the positivity that comes with it, then hopefully it will just become a bigger part of, maybe fair trade just becomes what it is.
Yeah. So to keep things going here, to go through the tough things about launching a brand, many people starting out there are always trying to find, it's not an easy leap of faith there. So amongst the sequence of events, sales order versus purchase order, are you first selling before you start buying? Or are you putting skin in the game and you first buy and you take the leap of faith and then you figure out how to make the sales work? How did it work for Mitely, and what would your recommendation be for anybody who's out there thinking about starting a brand today?
I think that so I can tell you from Mitely's perspective, and we started out as DTC, so direct to consumer. So just because of that, we're putting our skin in the game before anything else. We're making all sorts of assumptions and bets on product. The only thing I think that we know is that there are seasons, right? So
of course,
wear short sleeves in the summer and spring, long sleeve in winter. Things like that we can predict, but that's about it. That is still a big part of our story. We have we have an arm of wholesale, which means that now I don't know if it's the right word is tension, but we have some data that's like pushing what we're thinking in terms of our own projections on DTC. And then in theory, that will help with minimum and figuring out how to plan for next year. Our calendar, we work pretty far ahead, but that's because we're importing, and I think touching on this later, but sending as much as we can by sea versus air, obviously is helpful. So we plan really far. As far as which comes first, it really depends on who your buyer is from a product or
business model necessarily. Just double clicking on that, when you said you plan out really far, what is a realistic lead time from the time you have an idea in your head to the time you think you should be able to have products in your store shelves for somebody who wants to make products today? Because everybody thinks it's like, hey, I go to Alibaba and I'm ordering it and it's here tomorrow and then I'm going to start selling day after. But when the rubber hits the road, it's very different. So what would your advice be for somebody starting today?
Depends who we're working with. That's kind of the short answer. Factories have They have different lead times. I'm not a risk taker. I like to pad things. I don't like surprises. And I also like to give the factory like a comfort zone. But I'll say that if it's product that we've already developed, and if the raw materials aren't there, but they're familiar with it, something has to be developed. 120-day cycle is great for them. A factory will probably always tell you they can do less, but it depends how much pressure you'll feel comfortable putting. Again, QC, like up until the point when it's like on the boat or in an airplane, there's so many variables.
Oh.
And I'd also, one may decide if they place an order that something comes in, because there's like that wiggle time of, oh, wait, another order came in, or instead of doing this, maybe we might need to pivot. And
so that's 4 months.
That's like a normal, yeah.
It's 4 months from concept to when the product would leave the factory.
Oh, no, I would say I was thinking about like a placement, a purchase order.
Okay.
For a concept, I would add in another 3 months, because depending on what it is, but it's sampling. Apparel's a lot different than other things, but with apparel, you have just think about all the sizing, right? The SKUs mushroom out very quickly. For us, some of our stuff goes down like from baby size all the way up to tween. So it's just a lot of sizing and SKUs and fits. But if it's something basic, maybe there's just like a change in color, let's say, or screen print, add in 3 to 4 weeks, and I think you'd be fine.
Okay. So you would say a safe bet would be 3 months to essentially go from a concept to an approved sample. And you're going through multiple iterations in this process. From what we've seen at Silq, one of the things we do offer, which you're aware of, is as samples get ready, you can talk about just a single sampling cycle could be up to 4 weeks. You giving the factory feedback, the factory making the sample, the factory reviewing the sample, putting it in on DHL or whatever courier service to ship it to the US, you giving them, reviewing the sample and giving them feedback. That's a 3 to 4 week cycle on average. And you're doing a couple of rounds of this sampling for different sizes, different feedback loops you have. And a lot of times, so that becomes very cumbersome. And that's the cycle that you're talking about a 3-month timeline for that. Obviously, one of the offerings that we have over there to specifically target this problem is trying to be like, hey, let's eliminate samples that don't meet expectations. So we do have people who visit the factory to review the sample before it's put on DHL. At the end of the day, it's still $150 to $200 to ship a sample from factory to you. So let's save ourselves the money, let's save ourselves the time by eliminating samples that don't work.
Absolutely. I would much rather have that, or a photograph of someone from the Silq team saying, you know what, this just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
It's time and money. It's great.
Yeah. So that's a 3-month cycle there. And then after that, you place a PO, and you're talking about a 4-month cycle for production, or are you talking about 4 months before it shows up at your warehouse in the United States?
I would say anywhere from 90 to 120 days of production.
Okay, so just manufacturing process is 90 to 120, and then you have.
And I would include like the QC as part of that. So like when Silq comes in, and that gets all scheduled, which is nice.
Of course.
The reporting and everything.
That makes a ton of sense. A continuation or extension of that question is that you're balancing what we call the iron triangle here, right? There's quality, there's cost, and then there's timelines. You're balancing all three of these. Oftentimes we've seen this happen where, to the point that you were mentioning earlier, you want to bring everything by sea. Obviously, when delays happen, now suddenly you're going to have to air freight, which means your cost goes up. Or you essentially are trying to compromise on quality. You're not trying to push back something and say, hey, redo this particular piece. And you're going to take that chance and you're going to compromise on quality. Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult balance. Could you maybe speak to it a little bit more on how you perceive this? I want to say there's a hard and fast rule on what comes first, second, and third, but then I think it's a matter of perception. It's a matter of evolution as a brand. So it also goes into how you manage your suppliers and relationships. So maybe could you speak to how you see that particular conundrum?
I think that because there are so many moving parts from the very beginning, so I would say having as much upfront information as possible. I'll say, like with working with Silq, once I place a purchase order, I also send it to your team, or the team that I work. And that's just for visibility. As much help as I can get from all of the partners, the better, the more eyes on it is super helpful. And in terms of the process, I would say deciding on how deep you want to go. So it's terms of there's a quality control and there's from as a finished product, but there's also if you're an apparel and you want to make sure that all your fabric is tested, that creates another 1 or 2 weeks. You may find out that like a fabric is pilling more than you would expect it, but if you can set as much of that up ahead of time and that your expectations, again, like with your partner suppliers, all the better. And then having the partnership like we have with Silq. I'm in California in the Bay Area. We primarily produce in India. It's really far away. I think my advice to pretty much anyone that's ever asked me if like how to get something made is you have to have someone there. And there have been times when I've sent an email like, I think something's going on or something isn't going on. Can someone check on it? Yeah. And that's really important. I can be told something, but there's a constant keeping the faith. And it's not, I wouldn't say anything's ever like malicious, but it's in the end, 3 days can really matter because 3 days there's another delay, it can end up being a week or weeks. And all of a sudden, if you have a wholesale model and your orders are late, that's a huge problem. I would say as far as managing expectations and for everyone, having help is really key. And that would be local and in-person help. And it doesn't necessarily mean like a full-time person inside of what's going on, but even if I think that's something that you can work out and with whatever schedule you have.
Of course.
Your production team.
Makes sense. It's incredible to hear this, right? It's a lot of positive affirmation to positive reinforcement for what we've been, the perspective we have into the world of supply chain and manufacturing. At the end of the day, this is what I tell my team all the time is Silq is in the business of selling trust. And I want to make sure that while we are selling the service, at the end of the day, it is a for-profit organization. At the end of the day, it is built on trust. It's a foundation. The foundation is trust. Our customers need to believe that we are giving them the reality of what's happening on the ground while also maintaining peace and harmony in the supply chain. It's not about throwing everybody under the bus and trying to make it seem like I'm the right guy or wearing the superhero cape and trying to sound like the guy who solves all the problems. It is important that we present the facts and we let people make the decisions. At no point in time should Silq be determining whether this is a failure or this is a success. Our responsibility is to present the insights, and then people who are at the other end of the table make the decision on what they're going to do with it. But to your point, continuing on that particular topic, managing trust, essentially, it's trust, but verify is how we essentially say it. You work with suppliers around the world, and you have to essentially work under a certain amount of trust with all of these customers, with these suppliers. But how do you verify that? To your point, you were saying about having defined quality parameters. And that's something, very honestly speaking, I'm under NDA with a number of large companies. We're talking about companies that have they own rights to very popular avatars and cartoon characters and others, kidswear, that do not take that emphasis. I think we've seen the degradation over the last, let's call it 10, 15 years of not having to emphasize on defining what that parameters are, whether it's sizing charts, whether it's the grading, a whole bunch of things. Like you have Mitely on one extreme, and then we have customers who would be like, hey, go to this, I'm not going to name the retail store, but go to this retail store, pick up this particular product, and can you go replicate this for me with these kind of design changes? And that's it. And there's no more information beyond that. We've seen both extremes of that. So what kind of guardrails do you set with your suppliers? Because to some extent, they're also your R&D partners. They are also telling you what's possible and what's not. So how do you find that balance while you're able to maintain that trust that, hey, they are saying what's right for our mutual success? And where do we fit in as Silq? How do we enable some of that? And how do you think about this whole thing?
I think actually the fair trade part of it goes a long way. I've worked with our main factory partners. I knew them previously. I worked with them. And when I started work with Mitely, when we brought them in, we already had relationships. Our lead merchandiser I've known for over a decade. So we're friendly. He can say, you know what, I got a little bit of an issue here. Let's just talk this out. And that happens. But there's like a person aspect to it. And I think that there's something embedded within the fair trade partnership that just speaks a lot to that. There's the trust, and I don't know, there's something like, I'll say kind of organic that happens around that.
Yeah.
But I also think that in terms of guardrails, I mean, having, like I said, having someone that I know that I can resource out and say, we may need a little extra for this
Support.
PO or this time, or maybe during development. I think that's really important. Otherwise, it really does mean like it's a big trip for one of us or from our team to go out. So I think that it's quite important. And I think making sure that as much as you can, the planning process, keeping on top of schedules, there's all sorts of tools. I think one of the things, I mentioned this before, apparel manufacturing is very manual. There's so many hands on it. And I'm from California. I live in the Bay Area. I'm not scared of tech at all. Everyone around me I'm the only person that's like not in tech. So like when we met, I think my like first reaction to my partners was, oh, Silq feels like there's like a tech piece, and that feels really good.
Yeah.
What's interesting, there's not a whole lot of tech involved in manufacturing.
Yeah.
And like having a platform that I can pull up, which I do for various reasons, multiple times a day, that has so many answers, it's amazing. And that is like just a part of what makes it work. Otherwise, there's nothing in real time. I can have as many calendars and Excel sheets. But what does it mean? It's just a bunch of cells, right? The information, I put those in there, and that's what I'm hoping for. This is, I guess, a little bit off topic, but as far as what I see, and I think an opportunity and is bringing that technology and bringing the transparency of managing the process, having more of that is really. So that's absolutely a plug. Maybe that gives you some ideas.
No, absolutely. I've heard this before, right? The data on a spreadsheet expires the minute you open it because it's old. Somebody sent it to you and the data is changed, right? So obviously trying to have information in one place, and this is something we preach internally. It's not about giving everybody data, and I think there is oodles and oodles of data at this point available in the world. It's about sharing insights. How do you interpret that data and putting it in a platform that is accessible to our customers is core to our offering, and it's part of one of the values we embody within Silq. And it's very reassuring to hear that is a value that you cherish, and then it enables you to be more efficient with your time and your business. All right, so now that brings us to almost the end. We have just a couple more questions. What's the one piece of advice you'd offer brands looking to diversify their supply chain today? Because I think in today's day and age, under the current administration, it's a very relevant topic. How easy is it? How quickly could somebody do it? What would your advice be to a brand owner?
I think it's a great asset to have, to be diverse. But I would say there can be a cost to it depending on what you're making. I'll just give an example. If you have a company and you're making t-shirts and you have a great business with t-shirts, but you only have one factory, and you could split it into two, which is probably going to upset your main factory because everyone likes lots of quantity in one single style, right? Or you could split it and then all of a sudden like the factory gets half of what they're used to. And that, for relationships, that's hard. So I would say if you're diversifying, doing it in a smart way, and also I think, and I've learned this myself, is to not try to have a factory do something that they're not an expert on. So I've done this myself where I'm like, oh, you're not used to sewing whatever fabric, it's going to be fine. It's still a knit, and it could just be a design, like a type of. But if you're seeing the signs or even hearing, hey, this isn't quite what we do, that's a sign to pause. But I also think, as far as finding other places, whether it's in the same country or completely different area, talking to either anyone who you know who are already importing from those places. There's all sorts of things to consider. Or I know, Ram, you have a lot of experience with factories and asking questions, references. Again, I think it goes back to knocking on all the doors you can and saying, hey, I feel there's trade secrets or industry secrets, but in terms of factories, there's plenty of people who I've recommended our factories to. Am I worried that they're going to take this space? we have good relationships, but they also everyone needs to stay busy, and that's in some ways more
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So I think sharing good information, and I think at least the people who I know are pretty honest about it and will say, hey, like, this is a great factory, you should work with them.
Yeah, good news is a very difficult secret, or good things to say about others is a very tough secret to keep. If a factory is really good at that, people are going to find ways to share it. And I don't believe in this notion that everything is zero sum at the end of the day. To your point, right, you need suppliers to be in business, which means it's difficult being in business today with the amount of volatility in the market. So the more business you drive their way, it's building goodwill, and it's going to come back to you in good ways.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in that position before where factories have said, thanks so much, this actually really helped us, and there's nothing to hide from that.
Yeah, and believe me, in today's day and age, information is everywhere. It's going to take 5 seconds to find somebody else's supplier today. It's not that hard for people to know where they're looking for it. But thank you. That was helpful, and so that kind of brings us to a wrap over here. Going back to bringing back the last slide over here. Now, get in touch with us. We are essentially a designated freight expert, so to speak, for fashion brands and frankly other industries as well. We work across fashion, cosmetics, industrials, electronics, and others. If you are an importer today listening to this, and if you have more questions, we would love to be of assistance. And likewise, that brings me to Barrie, who has an offer for our listeners about Nightly products. We are entering essentially the onset of the peak season. So Barrie, I'll let you speak to it.
Sure. So yeah, we would love to offer anyone that comes and wants to shop Nightly of an origin. Like I said, it's our women's brand, 25% off. And I believe if you email Silq, you can sign up and get a code from us for 25% off our website.
Lovely. We can make that easier if you just leave a comment over there, and one of us somebody from a team will be in touch with you guys, and we'll get you set up and give you access to that code. All right, then. So thank you, Barrie. Thank you very much for making the time and for some of the candid piece of advice and insights from deep in the trenches. We definitely live in interesting times with all the changes happening in global supply chains. So this is incredibly helpful. We look forward to staying in touch, and we look forward to growing this business with you.
Me as well. Thank you so much, Ram.
Thank you, guys. And again, for the listeners, this is the first of many webinars we have planned throughout the rest of this year. Stay tuned, stay connected, and do not hesitate to reach out to us. Or frankly, if you want us to introduce you to Barrie, please reach out to us. We'll make an introduction, or I'm sure you can find her on LinkedIn as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.